System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
TMK for Inner City Left. I am here with my bro and geopolitical expert, Amoja Lil Tanky Sumler. We have some things we discussed today. As you can see, Amoja, how I did the title. This is going to be sort of all the elections that are coming up or are happening and all that going on in the world right now. And I want to start, if I can, in France. As you may or may not know, President Macron called snap elections, and those are happening right now. I want to read this. This is the latest that I have, and then I'll throw it to you, Tank, and you can fill this in. People in France have voted to elect 577 members of the country's National Assembly. France's exit polls project the far-right National Rally is in the lead, left-wing New Popular Front in second, and President Emmanuel Macron's Central Party in third. There's a bunch of other stuff here, but I'm going to just pass it off to you. What happened here, and what's your take on this?
Well, we're in this bizarro world now where essentially it's the Republican type, the right-wing people that are starting to sound to the populace like, oh, my God, we might not go to World War III, right? And even that is an illusion because, like, Le Pen is definitely still an avowed Zionist, so you're not going to see much change as far as that foreign policy goes. In places like New Caledonia, they're going to put their foot down, Her whole thing is like these liberals are too weak. You can look at her a lot like Meloni, you know what I'm saying, in Italy. Not an avowed fascist, but you get these little bitty things where it's like, well, they might not be with the Ukrainian war. And so at least that's something I can take, But here's the thing. They came in first place, but they're still not undefeatable. Like at this point, and this is the great irony of the centrist, right? Whether you're talking about Democrats or whether you're talking about in France. If Macron was the coalition with the center-left party that came in second place, he would still have a supermajority, right? But he won't do that because he will not execute any of the things that they want to see, right? So he'd rather lose. And then, again, this is what you got with the Democrats in the United States. Another thing that's interesting to me about this, though, is why is it so much of Europe is trending to the right, right? This is what happens, and we've talked about this a lot. Like, liberalism yields to fascism. It's a half measure, and it never makes anyone quite happy. You don't really take care of the left, and you don't really take care of the right. No one's happy. So at the end of the day, a stronger move will always win. And it's really those kind of centrist people like Macron, it's their real job is to make sure the left under no circumstances get it. He's not happy that he didn't win, but I mean, who knows? Maybe he is, right? This is the Zelensky curse. All the people that bet their whole careers on him, they're all losing because Ukraine is losing. So much money is gone. But the fact that he called snap elections showed me he was a little bit detached from reality anyway. I mean, they were protests in the streets every day. I mean, the only person that's probably got more protests actively against him right now than Macron is probably Bibi Netanyahu, except they ain't putting up no guillotines in Tel Aviv. People are lighting literal, burning things in homage, effigies of Macron, and they got guillotines in the street. I mean, he's deeply unpopular. And for him not to understand what the French street was thinking, again, it just goes to show you how out of touch centrists often are. They're not really around real people.
And it's interesting that his party finished third in voting. And here in the United States, we're called Trump lovers or whatever it may be, because we're like, hey, maybe we should, instead of coalitioning with these, basically conservative lights, why not just enter into a party of people who already feel the ways that we feel. There's something on Inner City Left, at Inner City Left on Instagram. I was trying to look up, but I think I can just paraphrase it. It basically was saying the nothingness of Obama is what led us into Trump.
Undeniably.
You know? Yeah. And I think as you're looking at an administration like Macron, because France has been having their own, we have to vote for the liberals, or, these right-wing conservatives, the Le Pens of the world, they're going to win. And as you see now that the leftists are now or I don't want to say the leftists, it's a large group of people who have coalitioned. And again, I'm not an expert in French politics, but it does seem as if people saying, you know what, let's move away from these right lights, because at the end of the day, although they may, see, like you said, like, the war in Ukraine is still going to rage on, and France is going to be a part of that. And some of the people don't want that, and they will vote to say, I don't want that. And, like you said, it never seems like those on the centrists here want a coalition with us. They're always like, oh, if you don't support us, you're supporting this other group. But why don't you support us? Because maybe we would support you. I want to. Yeah, I want to keep going on that, because we saw, and I don't know, there's still information coming in on this, but in Bolivia, there was an attempted coup. And as you know, and we talked about this in almost every single episode, because I really think it's at the crux of, this globalist idea of it's so important that these mega corporations can have whatever they want. But Elon Musk saying we'll coup whoever we want. Lithium is one of the most, if not most important rare earth minerals that we have. And Bolivia has the number one reserves. So what went on here in Bolivia? What do you get from this?
The thing I want to remind most of our viewers is the spirit of revolution that exists in South America, right? Even Hugo Chavez called himself a Bolivarian. You know what I'm saying? The whole revolution is like, the Bolivarian revolution, right? That comes from Bolivia. That's that spirit. It's still a deeply indigenous population.
Matt said they're number one.
Yeah.
Matt Cedillo, yeah.
So what you end up with is people that haven't been westernized, right? They were not westernized by the Spaniards. They were not westernized by the English or the Americans. They still have this sense of tribe. And here's the thing. They deserve to be rich. They deserve to be rich. If lithium is going to be the super mineral of the 21st century, then they deserve to set market prices. This is where the West, where people realize there's just nothing but hypocrisy when you're coming out of the West, right? Because it's all democracy, 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 until your democracy says, I don't think American corporations should be able to come in and exploit my people and extract my natural resources by paying me under market value, right? The Americans want to have a million little Nigers, right? Like how we talked about how they have all that uranium and the French are giving them $11 a barrel for uranium, right? That's exactly what people like Elon Musk want to do. And this is why it's so important for people to understand Elon Musk is a deeply dangerous person. A person is advocating for coups on governments. Coups, there's no soft coup. There's no people die in coups, right? People die. So when you start talking about killing people for profit, that's deeply sick, right? And to him, all it is quarterly earnings. He's that detached away from what we're talking about. This is why we talk about the sociopathy and the psychopathy of billionaires, right? Where it's not people anymore. It's just numbers that are moving. But the Bolivarians are showing, once again, we're not just numbers. We're people. These are our resources, and we'll fight to protect them. Good for them.
Yeah, I wanted to read this, and I think this is, I'm going to discuss this. I'm going to hear your thoughts, and I'm going to let you know how I feel about this. Our guy, Evo Morales, I think, we both have a very soft spot in our heart for him. He's the former president of Bolivia. He basically was saying that President Arce, who was formerly basically a part of the same party, that he also may have been a part of orchestrating this coup in an attempt to kind of cozy up a little bit with the West. And, of course, this is just, I wouldn't even report this if it wasn't Evo Morales saying it. And I kind of feel like there's always so much pressure on every leader of a country to bow to the economic hit jobs that the West brings them. You were mentioning a little bit about Niger, and I can't remember. I think it was Niger, but it could have been Burkina Faso. I mean, that whole region is also rich in minerals. Mm-hmm. And basically, the French were getting uranium for like $15 a barrel. Like straight up.
It was powering 40% of the French power grid.
Yeah.
Niger, uranium, that they're getting for $13 to $15 a barrel.
Pennies on the dollar. And
so they're making this is hypocrisy when we talk about like the Paris Accords, right? Because of what they're able to do in Africa, the way they were able to exploit African resources, right? They're able to make their climate goals happen, right? Meanwhile, the people in Niger don't even have electricity. A significant percentage of the population. Meanwhile, you have resources that means your country should be looking like Wakanda.
I think people are just
look at the West.
They're just. You put me on a book that was really important last year, and King Leopold's Ghost, and it showed me sort of a lot of that West's mentality, of going in there and saying, "Hey, we're here to help. We want to bring Christianity here. We want to bring civilization. You know how they be. And they basically exploited them for several resources, but mainly rubber. And rubber was one of the most, we obviously make it synthetically now, but the rubber plant was a very important part of the economy at that time. And you kind of see that Congo is still dealing with those effects of colonization and neo-colonial influences.
This is what the right never see, right? Like, oh, why hasn't Africa developed themselves? And they use it as fodder for like their white supremacist fantasies. Like, oh, without the West, they never civilized themselves. But the reality is that their lack of advancement as far as like development status as their nations goes is a direct result of exploitation from the West, right? Like these are the things that continue to happen. And that's exactly what they wanted to see happen in Bolivia. Unfortunately, the Americans didn't have the pulse of the people. The people were for this government. The government represented those people. And in the end, even most of the military didn't go along with that. To make a coup happen, you have to have one of two things, the military and or the people. But at the end of the day, you have to have the people that have the most guns, right? If that's the people, you got to have the people. If it's the military, it has to be the military. Unfortunately, they didn't have either. They had one guy, right? And the rest of the country's like, nah, we're not doing this.
Especially because you pulled the same trick now in just a few years. And I think when people are on high alert like that, you're going to have less success. And I also wanted to mention too, I think this is something the West has a big problem. Not want to say big problem, but the West uses this as propaganda. And then like you're mentioning, like they use this as propaganda. And then they'll say things like, oh, well, now, but President Putin is on his third term, or President Xi is on his third term, or Evo Morales, who was going for the third term, but even said, you know what, I'm going to back out, because that's the type of person that he was. Lula in Brazil, still coming back. And I think that it's because, and we understand this in America through the idea of like the untouchables or whatever during like the Prohibition era. But like, it's not many people who get to the top of a political standing and are are resistant to bribes or the betterment of their family or whatever it may be. We see in Ukraine, you were mentioning to me that President Zelensky's wife bought a Bugatti. You were like, what do you think she bought? And I was like, Rolls Royce, thinking like, because to me, that was just the neo-Nazi car of choice. From what we saw.
She's a sophisticated woman. Okay. It's not, why could you expect her to drive something less than a Bugatti, man? Come on.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. And anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I think what America likes to do, or the West likes to do, point a finger at someone and go, oh, that president's got 3 terms, or that person's got blah, 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 blah.
How many terms has Trudeau had? How many terms has Bibi Netanyahu had?
Jordan has a king. I mean, for God's sake, first of all, right. Joe Biden has been in politics for so long. We are witnessing his body decompose on stage. But I have to hear that, Evo Morales, he doesn't want a 3rd term, or Lula is getting older. I mean, again, we had one of our first podcasts that we put on YouTube was, Dear America, worry about yourself. And it seems like that's the thing. I wanted to move on, because this is, in a lot of ways, other than, the Palestinian conflict and the genocide that's happening, the biggest news story in the world. And that is Russia's advance in Ukraine. And because it's the elections episode, I'd even want to frame it around Zelensky. And this is also, I just want to say, at Inner City Left on Instagram, we are one of the, I don't want to say the voice of the left. Some people have called us that.
Wow.
I don't want to say, particularly it was me. Anyway, I can't find it. But basically, people in the Ukraine want elections. This isn't this story of, we love him so much, we'll wait till the war is over, and he's talking, all this stuff. But what is your response to in terms of Zelensky's life right now as a president?
If Zelensky had the mandate of the people, he would have been the first one to put up for elections. It's not like he term limited out. He didn't. He just knows if he runs, he'll lose. I mean, there's several people that could beat him right now, and he knows that. And that means the money train is over, He's not even really worried about his life, which, he is playing a dangerous game with the West and with Russia. And at the end of the day, vassal states get crushed. And he's chosen to stop being a vassal state of the Russians and became a vassal of the West, of the Americans in particular. So you kind of have to do what they tell you to do. If you start having your own opinions, they don't got to do nothing. They just got to remove their protection and see how long you work out with your ideas. And he understands that, right? That's why, even though there's a law on the books in Ukraine that makes it illegal to talk about a ceasefire, now you're starting to see Zelensky suggesting, maybe we need to talk to the Russians. Bro, you got the wrong urgency for this. You really need to talk to the Russians, soon, because we're reaching a point that's dangerous. We're getting to a really dangerous point where all of the red lines that the Americans had at the beginning of this conflict have slowly eroded. At first, they weren't going to give them the HIMARS. At first, they weren't going to give them the F-16s. At first, they weren't going to give them the ATACMS. They're never going to give them the ATACMS, but the smaller kilometer package to make sure that no strikes happen inside of Russia. Now, you can strike inside of Russia, but only on the battle line, right? Now, you can use cluster missiles even over populated areas, right? All of these red lines that, at least on paper, America had 2 years ago, they're gone now. And because of that, you have the Russians changing the language that they're using. When they called in the American ambassador this week, they explained that we are no longer in a state of peace. That is significant. The Russians are really clever with their words. And this is something that y'all need to hear me on. This isn't quite them saying we're at war, but it's stating straight up we're no longer at peace. And we'll let your mind go with that everywhere where that goes, because that's significant. I mean, you're talking about perhaps, again, and I always try to emphasize what I'm saying, not the strongest military in the world, but definitely the most blooded, most competent army in the world. They know how to take land. They know how to hold land, right? This is something Americans in particular are just not good at. They haven't had to do it since World War II. Like, you saw what happened with George Bush going into Iraq, talking about mission accomplished. And then for the next 2-3 years, Americans are getting sent home in body bags because Americans don't really understand what it is to occupy territory in an explicit way with an army. They know how to blow shit up. They know how to destroy your government. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but basically what they want to do is find, sort of the ruling elite, get them on board. I mean, this is what they tried to do in Afghanistan, if you remember. And it ended up with people falling off of planes because you can't change the culture.
Terrifying.
I mean, even old Donnie J brought it up in the elections. People falling out of planes. I want to read this to you as you were mentioning this, and I just want to bring receipts to our family here who watch us every day. But former advisor to Zelensky and now enemy Alexei Arestovich is going to run for president of Ukraine and has called out all Ukrainians to force Zelensky out. Quote, Putin is my opponent, but when the time comes, I am ready to shake his hand.
And that's just one of the people. Like, so you still have, he now has issues with Sersky. He has issues with Zaluzhny. Zaluzhny is another person that probably could beat him if they ran for president. The mayor of Kyiv, what's his name? The boxer.
Klitschko. I don't remember which one.
Klitschko. Like, that's 3 different people that probably would beat him in a heads-up election that still have kind of the pulse of the people, or at the very least, they have the love of the people, right? And Zelensky doesn't. Zelensky is the guy who's literally grabbing fathers that are walking their kids in the park and throwing them in vans. I mean, again, these videos exist. Like,
I want to ask you this because I just want to bring out the hypocrisy. And I think that's what we're trying to get through to our audience is stop believing in propaganda. Because remember when this started, Wagner, if you were a prisoner, you could go to the front line, you could hop in Bakhmut and you could serve for 6 months if you chose, and you could, your sentence was expunged or whatever it may be. And now in the whole West got up in unison. Wait, what? Look what they're doing. And now you have the prisoners in Ukraine who, first of all, not even being asked if they want to go to the front line. Like you said, here's a gun, follow this person. And if you don't follow this person, you won't make it. So why the West is just ridiculous with this. Anyway, any other thoughts on this? Any other thoughts on anything today?
I just, it is important to look at these things and look at these trends. Most of the European parliaments that have voted, they're definitely trending rightwards. You're seeing this all across. And I don't quite know what that means. I do know it will not be good for immigrants. It may or may not signal some type of change in the Ukrainian theater. I think probably it means the golden money is coming to an end. Most of the people that were really pushing hard for the economics of the Ukrainian war, they're losing their elections, So that gravy train is closing. But I don't think it'll change much as far as like European perspectives as it relates to Gaza and most of the developing world. The only country in Europe that has applied to be part of BRICS is Turkey, right? And again, the fact that most Europeans still kind of bristle when I say European country, and I'm talking about Turkey,
Yeah. And I do think it's very interesting to also see people abandoning the center. And I think that as much as obviously there was going to be a very small chance that the left party was going to get the majority. But I think that there's a positive to see also in the fact that people like the Joe Bidens of the world, or the Macrons of the world, people who are just managers of the deep state or managers of sort of the global West agenda, they're doing poorly. And again, I think it's going to be on those of us in the left to continue to build our coalitions, to continue to educate as best we can. As Fred Hampton always talked about, you are not allowed to be in the Black Panthers unless you went through a 6-month political education program. And I think that's just, where people are learning more. I mean, the conflict in Gaza has absolutely opened up people's thoughts. And I think the debate also opened up people's eyes to the ridiculous dystopian nature of having a 80-year-old who can barely walk and talk and being the president of the United States, the Supreme Court now anyway, that's a whole other podcast. I'm just rambling here, but yeah.
Man, hey, it's okay, man. We'll just become the president and run a couple ops and it'll all be good, man. That's all we got to do.
Reminds me of the episode of The Boys we watched. We just started watching The Boys up again, so it was quite an interesting first episode, and I liked it. I want to just give a shout out because I forgot last time to give a shout out to our Patreons. I want to just give a big shout out to Jagel Art 97, No Ground, Robbie, Paula, Lissa, Lauren, Suzette, and Dennis. You already see all the stuff. If you can, show us some love, like and subscribe. We do podcasts. Actually, I just want to give a shout out to the podcast listeners. I always, I always forget y'all, but we know y'all was hanging around us. This is, shout out to Glenn Close. This is episode 101. I'm not a dog person, but you are. So whatever. Well, I'll just throw that out there. So yeah, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, everywhere you find podcasts. If you can't hit us up on YouTube, tell your friends and whatever. Anything else from you, Tanky?
By the time you see this podcast, it'll probably be time for you to go get Section 762s and project.
And you can always support us as well by streaming our music, which you hear in the beginning and the end of our videos. We're also vocalists, so check out Lil Tanky's new album dropping so appropriately July 4th.
Somebody got some freedom up in this thing, man.
That's a fact. So we'll be bumping that while we're listening to Fireworks. Much love to y'all and peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' in the city left.